And for many people, it's miraculous Bitcoin emerged suddenly in 2009. And nobody knows first. It was just the of a few weird geeks in a few weird mailing lists. But after a while, people started, now it's become this worldwide phenomenon. And you might be skeptical, like some person we don't know invented something we don't understand and launched it onto the world. Now, you know, my younger cousins think I should invest all of my money into this thing. And my aunt thinks it's a pyramid scheme, and I can't tell who's right. If you think about this as an investor, you may be missing the most important point, which is that what this represents isn't an opportunity to get rich, isn't an opportunity to find a new thing to invest in. It's an opportunity to change the fundamental way finance, money, and banking works in the 21st century world. If you don't change it for you, if you don't think you need to change it for you, think for a moment about the billions of people who have no access to banking and no hope of ever getting access to banking. And think about what happens if all of them are able to run a bank on a $25 Android phone, and what that does to our world. Some bad people are going to be able to do some transactions. And that's how it works. And on that simple balance, we can change the world. So my interest in Bitcoin, discover something else, and that's even more excited, and then I stay up longer, and I have more coffee, and I read more, and I get all excited. Some of you share that with me. It's okay, but some of you I know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's a really cool reason to be interested in this technology. As someone who works in insurance, and it would be really useful in your career, like learning how to use databases or parties, the politics of principles, the politics of growing up as a kid in Greece and seeing out that short will. The bottom line is that money is the magical technology, and as long as it works out how money works, we'd clarify. Surely that can't be true. Just make out of thin air and distribute it to banks. They get to lay out money that didn't exist and then charge us interest and get richer and richer. No, come on, that's a scam. That's a pyramid scheme. The dollar on a pyramid scheme? Tell me it isn't so. If we understood modern central banking, most of us would be horrified. So it's convenient that as long as it works, we don't really need to pay attention. Well, let me tell you something. In 2008, it broke. And we didn't fix what broke. In 2008, our economy broke, the worldwide economy broke, and central banking broke hard. And it hasn't been fixed. In the meantime, since then, the world has issued almost $100 trillion debt by some measure, all of which is money borrowed from your future retirement plans, from your future education plans, from your future healthcare plan, from the economy, right? And that money isn't going to be paid back. It's not going to be paid back. There's a simple reason for that. Everyone's broke. JP Morgan Chase is bankrupt. Bank of America is bankrupt. Goldman Sachs is bankrupt. The United States government is bankrupt. Europe is bankrupt. Euro bankrupt. Deutsche Bank is bankrupt. Japan is bankrupt. China is bankrupt. They're all bankrupt. They're around with a book, hide some debt, make bilateral agreements, shuffle shit around, pretend to bail out Greece, send the money and then backdoor straight back to Deutsche Bank, find some other patsies, appear like nothing's happening, and so at some point there's going to be a reckoning. We never fix anything that happened in 2008. What we did was destroy currency in order to preserve the illusion economy. And that has to come back and bite us. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to think that this is going to be important in your life. And really, really hope it doesn't. But one of the reasons it was created, one of the reasons it's important, is because it's neutral, because it's independent, because one can control it, because one can change its influence, because one can create it out in air. It's ironic to see criticism of Bitcoin by mainstream economists. They say things like, it's not backed by anything. And really the question you should ask at that point, and the dollar is, of course, the dollar is backed. That story as to what backed by. Because then you have to learn some theory about Henry Kissinger and the Saudis and the little deal made in 1971. Some towers fell, some nasty things happened, and we've been at war for 18 years. But anyway, the dollar is backed by something. War. To protect oil. And Bitcoin is backed by an international community of geeks. The same geeks who brought you the internet. So again, at some point, hopefully you never have to make this choice in your life because you can always have the freedom to choose one currency versus another. But at some point, you might be forced to choose between the bankers who brought you the Great Depression and the geeks who brought you the internet. And I hope you make the right choice. But then again, if you hear some of the people in the whole blockchain, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin space talk, you might think the goal of all of this is to eradicate government money as the first step towards eradicating government altogether and replacing all currencies with Bitcoin. One coin to rule them all. World domination. I'm not of that opinion. In fact, I think the idea of having only one world currency is a bit of a throwback to our current currency system. We've grown up with a system of currency where all currencies are backed by nation states. They represent flags, right? They have wrapped up in the commercial mechanism of value a bit of nationalism and patriotism and a flag-waving person. And in each country, it's a different flag. And, you know, they can all do their little chant. By the way, if you go to other countries, when they wave their flag, they also chant #1. It's a bit like when you ask people, are you a good driver? And they say, yeah, definitely. And then 80% of people say they're above average driver. How does the math on that work? So we have become accustomed to a world in which currencies represent nations, and therefore they're part of this battle. It's like the world is a big chessboard, and currencies are pawns that are fighting on this big geopolitical battle. And the dollar wins if the ruble fails. It's country versus country. And in that environment, it's natural to think that currency as a system is a winner-takes-all system, or a zero-sum game, where the only way that one currency wins is by another currency losing. And that's a world in which you cut off your nose to spite your face, which is good summary of our current foreign policy, but also a good summary of foreign policy of Russia. We are currently engaged in currency wars, and in those currency wars, we are expected to assume that our currency, which represents our flag, is the one we should be backing. But if you stop and think about that for a second, you suddenly realize that that's not money anymore. That token is no longer representing a commercial transaction. It's not representing value for use in business. It's representing something else. It's representing some kind of nationalistic flag-waving thing that you're trying to beat the other side with. And in that environment, if that's what you know, if that's what you grew up with, then when something like Bitcoin comes along, your natural inclination is to think, oh, this one could win the zero-sum game. This one could dominate all others. But what if that's not how it plays out? What if instead, all along, money was simply a form of language? If we understood that money is a way for us to communicate value to each other, and as a language, there can never be one that wins.